will get emails like, hey, you got a FedEx package, click this link, or hey, so-and-so is sick, click this link to donate money to them. I mean, just all sorts of random emails. And if you click the email, a pop-up comes up and says, this is the internal team testing for social engineering, has this whole education piece on that, and then it says, by the way, your name is now on the wall sheep, or we call it the fish pond, but it's like the wall sheep at DEF CON. But basically, you end up being on this list, and then people will make fun of you. So the idea is it's to educate. Initially, they'll show stats every 6 months. Here is the last 2 campaigns we did. We're seeing improvement or not seeing improvement, but we're a big company and we train that way. I will point out though, some lessons learned when I do these recommendations and, what I've seen. You got to be very careful though with your social engineering training. For one, it's HR purpose type stuff. You need to make sure that you're touching, the right assets. So like, for example, we had one customer that, was doing the whole, you drop a USB keys, see who picks them up and plugs them in their computer. And, there's a thing called the Ducky. It's by Hack5. You can execute like code from those things. And, unfortunately in this case, somebody plugged one of those things in their home computer, not in their work computer. And they found, basically inappropriate material that got that person in trouble and basically terminated. But they were able to sue the company because it was basically touching systems that are not part of. It's like if it was touching one of the corporate systems, that's okay. They had to sign a paper saying anything on the system is able to review, but something touching a personal computer is not the case. So you definitely, when you do these social engineering trainings and exercises, or even using like a penetration testing book, you got to be careful with it. But training, is probably going to be the best route for that. I mean, anything from, another one is, I remember I used to do one for locking computers. You would go around the office and people would not lock their computer and walk away. So, one of the trainings for that was to go there and shoot emails from their computer. Hey, I'm paying for lunch today. And that person would have to pay for lunch. Social engineering, people are the weakest link. All you can do is train and hope. There's no, what's the quote for that? Layer zero. There's no fix for layer zero.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's not a technology problem. It's a training and people problem.
All right. Do people still pick up USBs and just put them in their computers?
You think they wouldn't, but it's surprisingly enough, people are curious.
Yes.
It's the same thing with like, you'd be surprised. I mean, I'll be at conferences like Black Hat or for wherever, and I'll get a text message that just looks ridiculous, and people are still clicking the text message. Like, oh, it's a mobile phone, so I can click this okay, and they don't realize the computer is by itself. Like, it's the same attacks. Just the hackers tune in a little bit, and
right.
People will still do it.
And also within the book, there were 2 very interesting chapters that I'd like for you to kind of briefly talk about. One, defensive countermeasures. I was like, okay, this is a book about pen testing, and here you are providing some defensive countermeasures. And 2, I've seen reports from vulnerability scanning and pen testing, and they provide some tool-generated reports, and they give that to an executive for the executive to kind of determine what they're going to do. And you actually had a chapter 8, which talked about some best practices in reporting. So if you could talk to me about chapter 7, defensive countermeasures and pen testing executive reports.
Sure. So one of the things, that I talked about initially when I was talking with Amir about this, because this is when we're initially doing the scope for this whole book. I wanted to do every chapter and at the very end have a remediation for that. So not only just say, this is cool, you can exploit and root the system, but then try to provide some kind of remediation, since, part of our background, what we've been doing is not only just doing pen testing and doing architecture work for various customers, but also we're also solution providers. So we wanted to kind of bring that into the book. But what would happen was in every chapter, it just became a lot of various types of angles to stop something. So I use an exploit, and there's like 5 different tools that can be used to fix that. So it ended up becoming like, well, it makes more sense to kind of group this into a whole chapter and dedicate this to kind of best practice for defending yourself, since some people may buy this book as a tool to attack, but some people may buy this book as a tool to defend. And like, for example, cross-site scripting, using NoScript. NoScript is a free tool you can use. Initially we had that in the cross-site scripting chapter. Then we're like, well, in the defense chapter, we should just kind of list out the previous chapters and have, sections of tools that we can use for defense. So that's kind of how that chapter happened was. That's kind of our passion of being solution recommendation people and kind of putting that into a chapter. The reporting chapter was actually, kind of summarizing the initial question around the audience. Again, we really feel like this book is good in the state that you can actually use this to get data, and it's not just you have to go through it, kind of do a couple of attacks with some tools, and that's it. Like, we actually want you to use this and be able to do reports. Because in a lot of cases, it's cool if you can do something, but customers want to know why. Like, if you're going to say, hey, you're vulnerable and you show stats, we got in 50% of the time, or these systems were able to be compromised, the immediate question that will be asked every time is, well, how'd you do it? Why is this done? Can you show me the details? Like, customers want to see reports. They want to see data. So chapter 8 was focused on that because it just seems like every time we have to give a deliverable, and the reporting is critical. And a lot of these books out there will give you the tools that you need, but then you have to kind of invent the reports yourself. So we thought it was important to kind of tie that in. But at the very end, if you go through all 6 chapters and you do the work, then afterward you can refer to chapter 8 and be able to customize it to a real deliverable.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciated that. Again, you are listening to the SecurityOrb Show. I am speaking with Joseph Muniz. He is the co-author of the Web Penetration Testing with Kali Linux, as well as the creator of the Security Blogger. If you can, could you tell us a little bit about the website, thesecurityblogger.com?
Sure. Now, so that's important to me. Kind of started off as I got to do a lot of consulting work initially. Now I work for Cisco. So it's a different type of consulting work. But in general, when I meet with customers or I do service delivery work or whatever it is, a lot of times people ask the same questions because, again, like if they're seeing, for example, access control technology for the first time and they don't understand how to profile something based on DHCP, DNS, et cetera, and they're like, oh, technically, how does this work? Rather than explaining it for 30 minutes, I started to use the security blogger as a avenue to basically summarize these common scenarios, common questions, or common seen problems out there. So I don't have to keep repeating myself. So I can say, well, here's the answer to that. Read this blog post. Next question, kind of thing. And just over the years, it's kind of turned into, I've seen, really cool things out there, cool tools, so like I've had to build multiple labs and I'm like, oh, while I'm building this lab, I should document this. And I'll take some pictures, take some screenshots and do a blog post on it. Or, somebody will ask, hey, how did you, do this thing? I was in a hotel and I was doing some wireless type stuff with this cool little USB tool, tell me about that tool. And I was like, it's a good idea. I can blog this. So this blog's kind of become my repository for things like cool experiences, cool tools. And lately, actually, it's kind of grown now where I've had a lot of people reach out and say, hey, I've done this research, or hey, I wrote this infogram. Could you share this with your audience? So it's kind of matured now into a true kind of security collaboration blog, where initially it was just purely a tech repository for me. So I'm really proud of where it's going, and I hope that people keep contributing and keep wanting to send me stuff to put up there.
Interesting. Yeah, that definitely. I saw a few of the articles, and they were very detailed type articles too. So that they were very well written and very detailed. You discussed some of the major issues that you would face. You would place them on the security blogger. If you can, when you conduct some of these web penetration testing activities, what are the more common findings that you find within the customer websites that are coming up over and over again?
Well, one thing is every single engagement is different. I mean, it's hard to really say that there's a formula to, you're going to see this every time you're out there. I will say that there obviously is a best practice So the book follows that. So the idea of reconnaissance, and then if you exploit a system, establishing a foothold. So if that system gets patched, you have 10 other ways to get in the network and so forth. I mean, those are the same. But when it comes to things that we see and things that are seen when we're out there, it varies. I mean, on the people side, the vulnerabilities are very similar. People typically will always click something. The exercises can be repeated. So whether I'm cloning an intranet or cloning Facebook or something, for example, like a set or social engineering attack, that stuff's always the same. From a website perspective, it's interesting. A lot of companies forget what they've posted in the past. So, for example, if you go, we talk about this, use the Wayback Machine and look at older versions of websites. People forget what's on there, as well as people forget what's the information that's generally on a website. So, in a lot of cases, if you call and ask for somebody, they don't realize that information is public. A prime example of that is on the reconnaissance chapter. Going to LinkedIn or going to look at interviews and that kind of stuff. People just don't realize the information that's there. So that's always a common denominator. When it comes to hardening servers, it varies. That's different. It depends on the size of the customer, where they're located, who's managing the system, etc. When it comes to common things we see on that front. But in general, I mean, as long as you follow a best practice and you more or less focus on your target audience, you do the right reconnaissance, etc. 100% of the time, we always find something. I mean, there's never been a penetration test where we're like, all right, these guys, it's perfect. There's nothing here. We can't get in. There's always a way, whether it's the company, whether it's the associated companies. There's been a few times where we couldn't get in through the direct company, but somebody they're doing business with, so somebody who supplies something, we just attack them. And they don't realize that they're letting in these systems through a vendor or something like that. And by attacking the vendor or the service provider or something like that, that's the way in. There's always a way in.
Right.
And, it's just unfortunately, it's a cat and mouse game.
Right.
And on the attack side, there's always 10 more vulnerabilities being found. I mean, I don't know if you saw the news yesterday. There's OpenSSL. Heartbleed was announced. I posted it yesterday, but yesterday they announced a new OpenSSL vulnerability. I mean, it's just crazy how these things just keep popping up.
Yeah, and that brings me to an interesting question that's been flying around ever since the Heartbleed situation and the TrueCrypt and now this recent SSL thing. What is the reputation? The reputation or the status of open source tools now with all of these things that just recently happened, in your opinion?
It's interesting. I mean, in general, my opinion, this is my personal opinion, that open source is critical. The reason why, and it's a very simple, core fact is this: technology, from a security perspective, could only do so much. So, if I'm going to invent a box and not make it open source, make it closed source, and it's going to basically do some secret sauce, whether it's signature, behavior algorithms, and stop bad stuff, in the end, the bad guys, if I'm making millions exploiting systems, my reconnaissance is going to be to buy that system and test against it. So in the end, there's no silver bullet, and there never will be a silver bullet. So I personally believe that security is all about open source, and that technology, it basically is going to go to the point of all cloud and all collaboration and all open source, meaning that if you attack somebody, that information will be shared through basically a source of millions of people all talking about that attack. So immediately, you have a bazillion people writing defenses against that and reacting, rather than vendors being closed source and all that. So I believe 5 years from now, if you buy a security appliance, it's going to be a dumb box, like an access point that's managed by a controller, and you basically are paying for security research, and you're also leveraging basically open source communities sharing data. I mean, that's where security has to go if we're going to be able to react to all these dynamic attacks.
Right.
And it's just that's why I believe at Cisco at least we're starting to go that route. So like RSA Europe, we announced the RSA. In California, we announced Open App ID. So the idea of sharing that data around looking at a website and figuring out what it is. Is it an adult website? Is it a gambling website? Like the tagging of websites, we're already sharing that. We're sharing like Snort, ClamAV. We're doing a lot of open source there. I see other vendors are starting to do that as well.